Well, there we go. So we are here for another podcast with the NX Enterprise series, and we are here joined by a whole panel of architects. All of you, I think. Yes. Yeah, it
Yeah,
looks like
we got a whole group of us. Yes, pretty much.
awesome. So I know Youssef. Youssef brought along a lot of y'all. Me and Josh have actually met before. Interestingly, didn't realize this was the same Josh I've talked to in the past. But Youssef, why don't you introduce yourself and then pass it on to the next person, and we'll learn about y'all.
Absolutely. My name is Youssef. I am Director of Engineering here at Cvent. And this is actually, I believe, my third podcast with you, Zack. We have done two when I was at Capital One. I've been here at Cvent for a couple of years, and I've been working closely with Kevin, Josh, and Ladi almost every day. I'm actually a consumer of whatever these guys build here at Cvent, and we'll get a bit more into that. I will pass it to Ladi.
Hi, Ladi Kobiti. I'm an architect or principal architect here at Cvent. I work out of our R&D org, specifically on, I think, what in the industry would call platform engineering. We call it development frameworks, but it's just a team building tool for other developers to use, sort of setting golden paths and whatnot around how applications should be built in general. And I will pass it on. And I work with Kevin, Josh, and Youssef quite a bit. And I'll pass it on to Kevin.
Hi, I'm Kevin O'Brien. I'm also an architect here at Cvent. Work with these folks on our platform engineering is probably the best way to call it for folks outside of our company, but we call it our Cvent development framework, which is a series of libraries for building applications and managing infrastructure and building our products. And Josh.
And to be last, not least, I'm Josh Lartz, also an architect on that same R&D team. So you got like pretty much all the leadership of this team here. So we, like everyone already said, we are trying to build the right turnkey solutions for our teams. They don't have to think about it. We just give them the tools, the things, enable them to make business go faster. That's kind of our little one-liner mantra. Yeah, this is the whole platform engineering leadership team in one place.
That's awesome. Well, thanks y'all for joining us and welcome. I've noticed that y'all all mentioned platform engineering. That seems like a term that y'all are using here universally between all of you. So that's interesting. Before we get into that, though, before we get into sort of the meta, can we just maybe talk about at a high level, like what Cvent does, what y'all build, and like who your customers are?
I can take a little bit of stuff of that. We cater to the hospitality and event industry, and we build a whole lot of products. Right now, you are building this podcast with a product called StreamYard. We built something like StreamYard for people hosting events or webinars or any number of things online. Though our bread and butter is helping people run real world events like big conferences, things like that. So there's a software that powers registration, powers badge reading, many things like that. We have one integrated platform, one software platform for running your event program. Okay. And then we also have other lines of business as well.
We're a software company. That wasn't obvious. We probably should have started with that. Like we build software. That's our business. Yeah, so we're targeting businesses for like end to end. That's the hospitality side. We also target customers and planners and people. We kind of have the whole event space on lockdown is the gist of it. So we're trying to serve all the people, whether the ones that are trying to organize, ones that are going to the event, and everywhere in between. The hybrid events like this, kind of all of it is the space we play in. But as an event in it, that's probably where we're going to operate.
Yeah, that makes sense. I assume that's kind of what Cvent meant. What does the C in Cvent stand for, actually?
Actually, it's nothing.
There's rumors, and we're not allowed to talk about it. There's different theories. That is the name of the company.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it. Yeah. I mean, I did.
It's a planned event.
It doesn't stand for anything really.
Gotcha. It was one of those .com companies, right? Everyone was putting like E in front of crap and letters in front of stuff. That's all it was.
Yeah, y'all were trying to start a new trend. I think like it was the I in front of everything for a while there too. like
Right,
the
right.
Apple stuff. Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
So when did y'all actually get founded? I imagine it must have been pre-COVID, but I also imagine things must have changed significantly at COVID. Is that fair?
Way back when.
We've
That's probably 97, 98.
97. Wow. Okay.
Pre-first internet crash.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
yeah. So
We
that's
survived the first
been,
bubble.
yep, almost 3 decades. That Cvent has been around for almost 3 decades. And a lot of people, don't know that. Right? A lot of people do think that it's a company. It has been founded just like you said, Zach, maybe pre-COVID, but we are way older than that.
Yeah. Y'all are way pre-COVID. That's neat.
yes.
I guess we did hit this when we introduced, but how long have each of y'all been there?
It varies. I've been here 5 years.
Okay.
Actually, 5 years. I'm just gonna say 5 years. It's 5 years in about a week or two.
Okay.
But it's as good as five. Kevin, I think, has been here the longest.
I've been here 11 years, and doing anything for 11 years blows my mind. Like I can't believe I'm in the same job for 11 years when I stop and think about it.
Yeah.
I said the same thing before I started here also. I was a 3 year or less person forever, and I actually managed the plant here for 5.5 years, like right before Ladi, I think. So yeah, at least 5 years and change.
Yeah, and I've been here for a couple of years, and I've learned that it's very, very common at Cvents. If you ask around, people have been here more than a decade. There are people
Yeah.
who have been here 15 years, 17 years, 18 years, and it speaks highly of the culture of the company. When you have a lot of people, working for such a really great tech company for that many years, it speaks volume for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's very cool. And just to get like some understanding of the scope, like how many engineers do you think you have at Cvent right now?
Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, about 500, 600, if you include
You're
globally.
you're on the right
It's
scale. I wouldn't try to get more accurate than that, but it's
Sure.
about it.
Okay.
yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting. So so yeah, let's go ahead and move into the meta. So y'all are all kind of on the platform engineering team. Is that how this works? Is that how the things play out? And what does platform engineering mean to you?
Uh,
Ooh, that's a good question. I'll say what it means to me. Hopefully, we all have the same answers, but it
Yeah,
might be
we'll
different.
find out.
So, for me specifically, it's how you put applications together, meaning you're really thinking about the entire life cycle from a developer standpoint. So, when I say, hey, I want to build a web application, what does that actually mean? So, am I going to feature flag it? What am I going to use from an architecture standpoint? Am I going to use Redis for caching? Am I going to use Next.js, React? What am I like? Am I using Dino? Like all those choices you make, how do you handle configuration? Um, how do you deploy it as an infrastructure as code, right? What happens if I do want to use something cloud native? Maybe I want to run it in Lambda, or maybe I want to bring in other cloud components that other people haven't used yet for whatever reason. So for me, it means all those things is how do you put an application together? Um, and there's all sorts of different applications. It doesn't have to be just web applications, but it's thinking about all the various components that go into that and then adding the developer experience on top of that that says, hey, here's how we put it together, here's how it's going to work. And how do we reduce the cognitive load as much as we can so that the barrier of entry is low? Not to say you can't learn it, but make the barrier of entry low. Um, that's how I would classify platform engineering, I guess. Um, Kevin, Josh, I don't know if you guys want to take a stab at that, or you said.
I would just extend it a bit. Like I think for CVN, we do platform engineering broader than other people. A lot of companies, platform engineering means like I own a thing, like a database platform or some kind of service or some kind of shared thing. We have actually kind of through a very wide net, and we try to capture like the whole developer ecosystem, the whole like kind of DevX side of it. And like our measure of success is like, can a team start one of our projects, drop in some business code, and just like be off to the races? Like, can they just choose no technologies, new to boilerplate, just like I have a task to do a job, just spit out a thing, and we've chosen all the right things for them, wired it all together, made it all build, got it on the road. That's our vision. It's like the whole thing, in the end, which is more, I think, than some teams consider platform. Just to kind of clarify, yeah, like what I'm saying, we touch on everything in that umbrella.
And I would expand that one step further. We're not just worried about the one-time startup of building a new product, being able to take the platform centrally and apply it to existing products or up as updates, as changes to how we do things. So when we find a best practice or a new technology to replace an old technology, having the muscle memory and the mechanics to make that change go across those 500 developers and many teams and many products efficiently. That's kind of like one of our core missions. And that's part
That
of
migration story, you can't downplay it enough, right? Like it's not about templating and going, oh, you just created this thing and you walked away and now it's changed, right? It's how do you keep bringing people along? And obviously the build pipeline falls into that process, but that migration story is definitely a big part of it.
Yeah, for me, in one sentence, platform engineering is building for builders, right? It's trying to give them as many tools as possible so they can hit the ground running to build a product. So you always have to keep an eye open to see what is redundancy, right? Is there a redundancy going on during product developments that we can take and facilitate and centralize for everyone to use? So you always have to keep a lookout and always be working and talking to product engineering, as you know, that they always come up with some interesting ways of building products, and you have to be on the loop to facilitate that task as much as possible.
Very cool. I'm curious, is fluidity of engineers, like the ability to move them from team to team, is that a concern that y'all take into consideration as well? Is that something with how Cvent works that
we
you would
do like
want? Yeah, go ahead.
we do like it when, because of the common tooling and frameworks and whatnot, enable that. It's not a hard and fast rule because people will be blazing new technologies or new frameworks or new ways of doing things, and we encourage that too. But we call this thing internally our paved road, and those are a set of technologies that we help manage on this team, and other folks even also help manage. And one of the value props of that is you get support from other folks because they know it, right? And people can move from team to team because they are familiar with these things we've sort of deemed usable and what we call paved road.
Yeah, and we do actually have an internal program called the Developments Exchange Program, where actually engineers can, if they're interested in trying something else, or if there is a need, for example, of a UI engineer to build a product within a specific period of time, we do actually facilitate that path so they can go to that team, stay there within 5 months, 6 months, then they can boomerang back to their original team. This helps engineers a lot as they get to try different things. As you all know, like if you just join a new team, regardless of the skill set you have, you're going to learn a ton. You're going to learn about how the team functions, about how they do their day-to-day job, about their working agreements, and so on and so forth. So we definitely do encourage that, and we have a program here at Cvent for that.
Very cool. There's definitely a lot of things I'm latching on to from what y'all are saying that's really perking up my ears as someone that works at NX, just because a lot of the concerns that y'all seem to have, these are things we've kind of built our package around, is having actually for a lot of the things you're mentioning, we have specific mechanics to sort of support those, to codify those, and to help with migrations and stuff like that. So that's definitely very interesting. I think before we get into that, like we could talk about NX as much as y'all want, but before we get into that, I would love to talk just about like, how does your code base look without maybe getting too specific? Like, do you have one large mono repo? Are you doing it kind of Google style, or are things more segmented? Does front end work with back end?
Yeah.
And that goes for like the code and the teams
in
as
a
well.
nutshell.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have all of it. It's usually ownership focused, so it's not a giant mono repo. It's like that team is allowed to operate how they see fit. It might be one app, it might be a monorepo of many apps. It just kind of depends. We tend to prefer the monorepo approach like NX does, obviously. I think the tools have enabled us to do it successfully, so we push that more often these days. But yeah, it's mostly ownership boundaries, if I'm honest, is how the breakdown will go. And then inside of it, sort of depends. And also maturity. Like in the early days, the monolith days, we might have had single repos for single apps. We've grown quite a bit as we kind of federated out to be more monorepos, more stuff in one place. So we're also in that kind of growth journey as well.
In terms of sort of what we as a group deliver to our product teams is we encourage creating a mono repository with your infrastructure and your front end kind of mingled together and some other concerns. But there is still plenty of standalone repos doing single purpose microservices. We still have legacy. We've been around for almost 30 years. We have every flavor of everything somewhere. But you said you wanted to talk a little bit about NX, and I'll tell you, we deliver our framework for building apps using one very large NX plugin. That's our mechanic for delivering the things we've been talking about to these teams.
That's super interesting. Could you talk about that plugin a little bit more?
Sure. It's full of executors and migrations, and it is opinionated about how we want people to lay out things and create new projects, and it manages their dependencies for them. So it is all the things that a Narwhal plugin can do. We are leveraging. I don't think there's a feature we're not leveraging in terms of what you guys provide.
Yeah, I think the area of growth for us there would be the generator space. We obviously are leveraging it, but we still need to go a little bit more all in. It's definitely in the plans, but that might be the only area where I'd say there's still more to do there. But
yeah, we do have a lot of things.
Leverage all things NX.
We have our own templating system from before we adopted NX, and we still have a lot of things in that for what you would consider a generic generator workflow. And we were.
Gotcha. So for this, so for your other tool for templating, this is a way of kind of getting you set to a boilerplate starter application. Is that the idea, or
that's
is
where it ends?
More
yes,
like
it would the boilerplate and just stop, and that's where NX has really helped us take it to the next level. Like I think Kevin talked about it too, is we can then keep that template alive, keep it up to date, change the things underneath it, fix bugs even in configuration items. So that's been a big change for us. We can actually keep going with the template after it's gone out the door now. For anyone at any point in the journey, right? So they can start today, tomorrow, a year from now, they'll be able to kind of jump on the bandwagon and kind of stay up to date with us. That was a huge difference for us.
That's super interesting. Do you maybe have any specifics where you were able to use like a generator as a way of like fixing a bug?
We ship NX configurations for build system a lot. We actually fix NX with NX, ironically. So when we put config out the door, we can use migration, the generators and templates to like turn on flags or modify like the way we do like the build system. If we just find a bug or we get it wrong sometimes, we just push that out and then kind of fix a workflow problem for all the teams with the migration.
We can fix
it's more that the migrations help with the fixing of the bug, and the generators are a little bit more opting into things, or you're trying to do things that are not things we're trying to push on folks necessarily, but it's more opt-in.
Cool. Kevin, did you have something to add there?
Oh no, that pretty much covers it. The migrations have been the game changer for us. The ability to have one process the teams can follow, update our plugin, update NX, run migrations to come out, and then we can deliver all sorts of things. We can deliver major breaking changes to the libraries that they're using underneath the hood by updating them to updating it from making up React 5 to React 100, and then dealing with code mods to go change their business code as best as we can to help them take on those changes that library is sort of given them. And so that ability to take the burden off a team and say, you don't have to figure out just 29, 100%, or just 30 or just 35 or whatever. We'll try to do that for you, leveraging the Narwhal community or our own code mods delivered as NX migrations has been pretty nice. And in the past, it was a lot of documentation and a lot of one-on-one support. We're walking teams through how to do these updates. Still, lots of documentation and lots of one-on-one support, but definitely migrations have made it a lot better for us as a team.
That's awesome. Yeah. in general, especially looking out over sort of the landscape of what's going on with software these days, one of the things I think NX is positioned to do very well is to take a lot of these getting started guides, and a lot of these are multi-step processes where it's, do A, do B, do C, install X, do Y, and then finally you get to this place where you're done. A lot of what I would love to see in the future is a lot of these getting started to just be this one step, NX something. It doesn't have to be NX. It could be something else. It could use NX under the hood if it wants, or do something else, but something along that mechanism of just let's take this involved process and let's automate that just a little bit more. What's in here that we can't automate? Would be the idea, and that's kind of the thing we've taken to heart with trying to provide inside of our plugins. It's really awesome to see Cvent coming in and kind of doing the same thing too. So that was the obvious breadcrumb I felt like we were leaving for folks. So it's cool for y'all to have picked up on that. So that's awesome.
A funny story is that Cvent had actually its own CLI called NX. If you recall, Kevin, right? You guys had to rename it.
Yeah, well, I still was upset that I think the person who named the internal CLI NX was aware of Narwhal when they picked the name, but they're no longer with us. So
not because of this, but yeah.
No, I was gonna say not because of that or anything.
Get them out of here.
I can't complain about it and make fun that we did that. We had a very confusing time because we.
What are the odds, right? What are the odds that because I'm fairly new to Cvent. When I was talking to Kevin and Ladi, he's like, "Oh yeah, we have this thing called NX." Like, "Oh, good. You guys use Narwhal?" He's like, "No, we have our own thing called NX." I'm like, "Oh." And then
I can tell you the story of how that name came about. We had a code name for something else for years, an internal framework that we, as a joke, we call Nucleus, which was really a play on Silicon Valley, and it was funny. But then when we went to go do a more developer-friendly CLI and a whole nother set of tooling, the developer said, "Oh, it's like Nucleus Next, so let's just call it NX."
Next.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So when you say Silicon Valley, you mean actually like the HBO show?
TV show. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, got it. I don't remember what Nucleus was in there exactly. It was
the name famously of the big there's a joke there. There's a scene where one of the Gavin Norman character is it's talking about the new features in his like his Hulu Google fake company, the new features that are coming out, and he's talking to the press, and then they pan to a bunch of engineers. He goes, "Does he know we're like 6 months behind and we're not going to make it?" And da 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 da. And that's the name of the thing that we're working on was Nucleus. So that was why we adopted it at the time, because we just felt at the time pretty behind on our development. So we played off of that joke.
Gotcha. That's cool. Very cool. Well, yeah, I'm one thing I'm interested.
So where did your name NX come from?
So the original name for NX, I believe, was actually Angular extensions at the time. So a lot of things played off NG in the Angular community at the time. So we took the N, and the X was for extensions because we were extending on the Angular CLI. I believe that's the original origin of the name. And actually, so y'all have been mentioning Narwhal a good bit. We're in the process of completely rebranding to get rid of Narwhal as the company name and just go with NX as both the company name and as the package. So we're hoping like the Narwhal actually becomes kind of like our OctoKitty, like for GitHub. So that's maybe the direction we're going. We're not sure, but yeah, it's all very cool. The what NX has now evolved to mean, because we're way beyond Angular right now. In fact, I believe Angular is continues to be dropping in our plugins as to just how big each one is. For a long time, obviously Angular was the biggest. I believe React is significantly bigger now, and our Node one as well has expanded beyond that size too. So what we've taken it to mean now is like you have a 10x developer. We give you the ability to become NX developer. So scale yourself as much as you want. is
Nice.
kind of where
Actually
we've
makes some
taken that.
sense. Can't cringe too much.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. That's awesome.
Victor came up with that one day in a meeting. I was like, that's really brilliant, actually. I like that a lot.
That's
So
pretty clever.
yeah, so cool. But yeah, one thing I'm very interested in too, especially given sort of the way y'all have described using NX as a way to kind of pump changes out to the teams via the plugin. I'm actually really interested. Have y'all played around with or messed with the new idea of like inferred configuration via the Project Crystal stuff that it's dropped in?
We have not rolled anything out, but we have played with it quite a bit.
Okay.
I was definitely working in that space last night. And I know we've had a few POCs in that direction. It's definitely interesting. It's definitely interesting.
It does align what we do, quite frankly. Like we do a lot of kind of templating inference anyway with how we build things today. So it was a logical next step for us as well. It's just getting it right and how we put it out the door is what we're iterating. Yeah, definitely. I like the direction it's going. It definitely kind of fits more with like the magic turnkey approach we like to take.
Yeah, in particular, like especially if you are running things with configuration, like via migrations, it seems like the new inferred mechanism that we give now, this is almost an even nicer way of supporting these kind of migrations, in my opinion, because you could just push out a new version of the plugin, change how the way the inference works, and now rather than giving people a new version of the plugin saying, okay, we'll go run your migrations, you just say just install the new plugin, and you should be there. So
Definitely. The one thing. Sorry, you're going to say something, Kevin.
Oh, so that works for build tooling and kind of when the plugins are doing things like executing builds and things like that. But I think we spend most of our time migrating user code. That's kind of, and that's going to unfortunately probably not really benefit from the inference. Anywhere where we migrate a file that's under management from Narwhal, a project.json, maybe a package.json, then it's been pretty useful.
Right.
We've been leading.
The interesting bit with that, at least that we're toying with now, at least I'm toying with now, is sometimes people customize their project.json files, right? And so one of the things we still need to figure out is as we move towards inference, what does that mean? There's clearly ways you could help folks know what was there, what we were inferring, and then they could figure out what they want to hook into. But it's not, depending on the kind of customizations they're doing and what's happening on their end, it's not quite as clear, because sometimes our project.json files, it's not just a built-in test, right? Like the main ones. There's a lot more layers to it, and so that part of it is a bit interesting on how you do that and still without having everyone learn NX. How do you still have them customize it, knowing fully well that, oh, by the way, maybe I call this thing build, let's call it build NX. But underneath the covers, I change it to build Ladi. And I've done some other things with it. With Project Inference, I could do that easily and just say take a plugin. But what happens to the person that's customized and has added depends on build NX. And now there's no longer build NX, right? How do you inform them short of, in the worst case scenario, things could still build and be fine, and their target effectively just gets ignored. Or how do you inform them that, hey, something is wrong in a friendlier way? But
I think another way to restate that is if it's a file that is an extension point that can be customized, when we deal with so many teams, it's going to be customized.
Right.
And then we have to deal with how much automation or how much we build into dealing with the random changes someone has made to one of these files as part of our migration story. And it is kind of it's not an easy thing.
Yeah. I guess that's part of the problems with dealing with like Turing complete solutions is you kind of have to be able to account for everything, which is kind of what we've done here with Project Inference. Interestingly, like before you were kind of limited by JSON a little bit, right? Like you just you're limited to like what can you fit inside this JSON? There's no like functionality. There's no programming going into that, and now there is with the inclusion of the project inference.
That's one of the things I love about it. Quite frankly, I think you hinted to this earlier, but the idea that I could say, oh, you are using X feature, and because you're using X feature, I'm automatically going to add XYZ target to it, right? Oh, you have a tsconfig file. Because you have a tsconfig file, well, you guys kind of give that an out the box, so not a great example. But whatever the features we have internally, we're able to go, oh, you have that enabled. Because you have that enabled, you also need all these different targets as well. Being able to infer that, it's definitely powerful. It's the how you make it fully turnkey as you roll it out, and some of the edges we then have to figure out to get it out the best, if you will.
Absolutely.
There's tons of positive there. I'm glad Ladi covered them. Is like it solved a lot of problems, to be clear. That's just the one problem left that we're trying to figure out. Everything else is great. Like the fact we can read our own flags.
Yeah, it absolutely does.
Yeah, it absolutely does. That was one of the big trade-offs in my mind when we first dropped this off. Was to me, like when you break this down into like what did this mechanic introduce that was new? The big thing that I introduced that was new was not actually the inference. It's the ability to be programmatic with how your workspace is being configured now. This was actually one of the big things, one of my big motivations for trying to get this in. Actually, Youssef, when you were in town in Phoenix that one time for the NX Conf, I think this was like 2 years ago now. This is one of the things I was playing with. Is I had a side project that we're using for some of our examples and stuff at the time. It had this end-to-end test that would take something like 10 minutes to run, because every time it's wiping your database, it's seeding the database. It's actually using Playwright to just walk through a website and make all these things happen, and then it shuts everything down. And that's one test, and there's like 50 of these, right? So one of the things I was playing around with was actually using the NX mechanics at the time, generators and executors, to say and it trying to play around with some of the GitHub hooks so that you could this would happen automatically. But it was essentially just every time a new PR came in, let's read in all of your Playwright spec files. Let's Playwright, actually the CLI has a tool for just listing out every single test that could be run, and like parsing that out and making a executor or a target for each one of these individual tests. And then using some of the stuff we have with the NX Cloud platform, we have a way of easily distributing that, essentially making that parallelizable, able to run across multiple machines. So this way I could actually just start up 10 machines, and I could cut down the time of my end-to-end tests by a factor of 10. So each machine is still limited. It can only run test at a time. Otherwise it's going to clobber over itself. But now I have 10 machines running, and NX can just sort of tell each individual machine, hey, run this one now, run this one now, run this one now. And things could go really fast like that. The problem was this was so clunky to actually go in and create new PRs on top of my other PRs to say, hey, we need to update the project JSON files now to add all these new targets because we noticed there's new tests. So that was unfortunate. And there was ways of working around it. This is part of what I was putting out there, and the results were super encouraging. But what was missing was something like this project inference API that we have now, where you can just say, rather than writing to disk for this, we actually say, hey, this is how this stuff should be inferred now, or programmatically created. So now it's that's actually a really nice story. We call that the NX atomizer now, which is this idea of automatically atomizing out your tests. And we've added this to most of our plugins now. We actually locally we won't atomize. We'll still have your typical end-to-end target, but we have we call it the end-to-end ETE target, which will do this idea of kind of breaking these things up for you. So yeah, it's really nice, because when you look at my approach to how I was doing this, like I think maybe Kevin, it was you who said we don't want these people to have to learn NX, and you have to learn NX to understand what's going on with that approach. But for the with inference, there is still a lot of magic that's coming into play that we're introducing really with this. But I think that's a worthy trade-off for your average engineer not having to worry about that and just being able to see, hey, the plugins here, that's what's making, these targets show up. So yeah, that's
Definitely
the whole
agreed.
backstory to that. Sorry, Lottie, what did you say?
No, I said definitely agreed. Like the idea that you could simplify it for the end user that way, instead of you having to manually figure out 10 targets or whatever it is in your project.json, you can now programmatically, right, go, maybe the
Yeah.
last time it was 5, now it's 8, because other things got added and you didn't have to worry about it.
Yeah, very cool. Well, so these were, big considerations on the team internally too when we were getting ready to release this out. One of the biggest priorities was to get the new project detail view out, which was critical because before everyone could just look at their project JSON files and know exactly what was going on with each project. Now we have to make sure we're giving people a way of solidly seeing what's actually what is my project configuration now, because you can't, in some ways you can't trust the project JSON file anymore, and that's actually like a huge negative of that trade-off. Is not being able to trust what you're seeing on
For
disk
what it's
anymore.
worth, it's always kind of been the case, right? Maybe not to that extent, but at least the way we have it set up, you could do the whole default in NX to JSON, and then project to JSON just has a bit. And so you always had to know kind of how the two came together.
Right.
It wasn't quite as clear. I guess maybe the only benefit you had previously is that at least project.json still had to have the target in there, even if you didn't have the specifics.
And
But
that
it
was
gets very confusing when you have like one field, or you change just the depends on. But the
Yeah.
other thing is an NX. So for what it's worth, at least I don't feel like it added that much more complexity. But it did add some power to it.
Yeah, I love
I think
the power of it, and the runtime inference, and that problem of like split configs and having to mentally merge them is a problem pre-inference. So like the visualization you guys have produced, super important. Like you need to have it. Like I need to see really what is the plan based on these settings, because doing it in your head has resulted in bugs that we've shipped. It's been confusion for our customers when they've tweaked things. They think they're tweaking something. They didn't look at the root in NX.json. What's actually set up is not quite what they expected.
Very cool. Well, yeah, in some ways, I think we should have had something like that earlier, just because of what you mentioned. We want to make sure that's a solid thing, and I guess for me, the target defaults, absolutely, that does change things a little bit. But to me, seeing at least you could see all of your targets listed out at the end of the day. In the project JSON. Now it's
Right.
like if you want that discoverability, it's maybe not even there anymore with the inclusion of the project inference, which I think is generally a good thing. Like we want the project JSON file to not be boilerplate, if that makes sense. We want every line in there that is present to have meaning, but in doing so, we stopped it from being a source of truth. And it's an interesting point y'all bring up, that I guess it never was, ever since we included the idea of target defaults, which has kind of been there for a long time.
A
So I
minute,
think,
yeah.
yeah, I think that
And we leaned
predates.
into them too, so we
You
sort of hit
do,
that
okay,
early. Yeah.
interesting.
And that was when we're making the switch from everything being in project.json to things being in an Executors and target default. I don't remember exactly when, but whenever it was we're making the switch, that was one of my first initial reactions to it was, now I don't really know. But then as you got used to it, it became a lot cleaner, if you will, right? Where your project.json file may have a list of targets, but it didn't really have anything that wasn't quote unquote customized to that project. If not, it was just getting it from the default.
Yeah,
I think Inference has a little bit of that going as well, where over time, you will get used to, hey, I'm going to go run an X show or whatever, and I'm going to see what's actually in there. And the inference would just feel like maybe it's a double-edged sword, but their pipelines, at least at Cvent, we have various pipelines, and the pipelines we have where, generally speaking, the developers don't make changes to them. They're very set static pipelines, right? I feel like this kind of gives you both in a way, where in one way it's inferred, so it's all hidden away, but it still gives you the power of, but if you really do want to eject, you can. You just have to know a little bit more what's going on in the NX. And then, for us writing migrations and whatnot, we still have to figure out how to marry those customizations with whatever changes we're making. But I think it's the right direction for what it's worth.
Cool. Yeah, I think absolutely it's the right direction. It's interesting to see how it plays out, especially with y'all who have kind of been here before and are continuing to be here after. So that's quite cool. I wanted to latch on to something that was mentioned as well. I think maybe this was you, Kevin, who mentioned you had a lot of executors. Could you talk a little bit more about that and like maybe describe some of the interesting things that's going on with executors at Cvent?
Sure. We have we have a lot of internal systems and tooling like that we interact with to do our deployments, and so we wrapped a lot of those scripts or processes with executors, and then made them project defaults to then make our standard projects sort of use our standard tooling. Like we use Next.js as one of our web frameworks, and we want particular build settings to enable what's called a standalone build in Next.js. And so we built our own sort of Docker build process around that. That's very specific to the fact that we're in a PnP, a mono repository, with symlinks causing issues with standalone builds. We get sort of dealing with those sort of like odd platform marriages. We do that with our executors. So
Gotcha.
we take in the past, before Narwhal, we would write a lot of our own CLI scripts or tools or whatever. Now we're delivering those instead as executors. So just get the project graph, the dependencies, the caching, just come out of the box with our scripts now, as opposed to afterthoughts or things that we have to worry about. And then with an executor, we can expose a schema. It shows up in the nice GUI, Visual Studio Code. You can see what your arguments are. So there are benefits of that as well, right?
Most things start out as like a run script or run command, and then sooner or later we end up having to enhance them and then wrap them, and then like a couple years later now we have like 30 executors or something crazy. So we start out simple as best we can, like build TypeScript, right? Just do it the native-ish way possible, and eventually sooner or later we have to do something different or more, or the Cvent-ism comes into it, and we just kind of start wrapping everything. That's what it turns into in the end.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, for us too, like the move to Project Crystal, along with like the idea of inference, a lot of our plugins move towards moving away from executors where we could, and moving instead to like running commands just for each individual tool.
That's true.
Yeah, so that was an interesting change as well. Executors, though, they still definitely have their place. It's just it feels like their usage has evolved from my standpoint. Like Kevin, you mentioned like the schema that we expose that makes it very discoverable what the options are, but just the ability to parameterize these things in simple JavaScript, to me, that was one of the biggest powers of NX executors. So
like there is some overlap in inference. I will say, like we would sometimes have to put inference like logic in them to decide if they do or don't do a thing. Inference in a lot of ways has kind of replaced some of that need. They've become simpler in a good way. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Now we have this game of like, where does it belong? Is it a target inference problem statement, or is it an executor problem statement to solve?
The simpler the executor, the more likely we'll probably remove it or be undoing it. Some of our really weird ones also want to undo because there's usually complexity we don't need. We're like wrapping things. So I have seen us start to pull back from them. But we leaned hard into them before inference, and like places where we might be dealing with a bug or a platform, something lacking in somewhere. A lot of those bugs get fixed over time in these different platforms we interact with. And then all of a sudden you look at and go realize, I can just use the right Docker commands. So I don't need this anymore. You just pull it and then we get rid of it.
Right. Cool. Very cool. Yeah, another interesting thing that you mentioned. So this is not something that I had considered when thinking about what's the use case for the executors, but mentioning just that, for example, uh, you can leverage sort of the core abilities of NX to get the caching and task distribution and stuff like that out of it, and understand the dependencies. That's an interesting use for executors as well. I think in a lot of ways that still gets covered when you change from using an executor to just using a command. Maybe there's still some benefits there you get from the executor, particularly just with being able to cache based on the options you're passing in there too. But yeah, I don't know. I'll have to think about that more. Let me ask you all about this. What do y'all do for like CI/CD? Is that one of your concerns as part of the platform engineering team? I seen you smile, Kevin. Is that
Yes and
okay?
no. It is
Cool.
and it isn't, but it is.
Okay.
We have a
Interesting.
team that has it's their concern. But the way
Okay.
I look at it is we heavily influence where we want to see it go.
I see.
Is how I look at it. And by heavily influence, sometimes it means you're writing some code and then trying to push it to them and see how they want to take it. Um, but it's not directly our concern. Earlier, I think Kevin mentioned that, oh, they're build scripts or they're things that we may just want to wrap. It's because some of those processes existed that a team owns. And so even though we're pushing Novel and we're pushing the idea of these executors, sometimes we're just grabbing their tool and using it underneath the executor, right?
I see.
Yeah. That
And the
didn't
way
answer
it
your
looks,
actual question, though. I'm sorry, go ahead.
it's like think like a regular how to development teams in React. They have an API contract that they kind of publish. We just have to adhere to that contract. So from a build system perspective, we long ago decided we should keep this as simple and like agnostic as possible. So you do things like build and test and deploy to CI and like do your test and do your publish. Like we kind of do the meta of what a release in a CI process is. So like our CI pipelines are generic in that you do those things. What those things are, your question mark, that's up to you. That's where we start to fill in the blanks. We feel like when these meta phases run, we should do these things, and that's kind of where we layer in our parts. Like the CI/CD team for us, they just have to kind of keep the harbor running. The actual contract is kind of stable and centralized, and that's it. They run these things in order. If you didn't give it anything to run that step, it does nothing and kind of carries on. So it's been a pretty successful design decision, if I'm honest. For us, it's allowed us to bring it in a build system like NX and just kind of drop it in, and it took almost no work at all to make it fit that model because we had this very static pipe. And I bring this up because a lot of teams tend to go like CI first or like bespoke per team even. Like their first customization choice is I'm going to go write my YAML file and like change it up and do all this unique stuff. We said no to that a long time ago. Like you just get a simple pipeline that does these things and you opt in at a deeper level. In our case, like package JSON scripts or NX or whatever, like we did that as the contract. So glad we did because it makes local run the same. It makes any CI provider we use run the same. It was one of those like, we're glad we did it, looking back, kind of hindsight decisions. Whereas other times you see these repos that have like 500 lines of YAML because they just absolutely customized everything about it at a CI level, which is throwaway in a lot of ways, honestly.
Yeah. I've done some videos in the past of like the exploding complexity of these YAML files, especially as you try to make something more optimized or make something more bespoke or mature, maybe might even be a good word. This was actually an interesting thing for us, because I think at our core, I think the way y'all see NX, it's mainly as a way to. It's almost like the way y'all speak about platform engineering. It's almost like a platform engineering tool that seems to match up very closely with how Cvent views platform engineering. So that's awesome. The interesting thing for us is we seem to we we are converging on NX as a way of doing this kind of platform engineering, and then easily transferring that onto providing a much better like CI/CD experience, if that makes sense. Because we already have all of the information required for your repo at this point to understand how to do that very well. And we can actually do a very mature, very optimized CI for you now based on that information. That's actually doesn't have that problem of the exploding YAML file. Because it's almost like a declarative versus imperative approach. Like the 500 line YAML files, usually that's because you have to say, okay, first do this, then you got to do this. You got to make sure you run the build first, and then you can run this. And then if you want to do something like, well, ignore things that aren't affected or use the cache, those things are all things you have to kind of built into that imperative step-by-step process. Versus what we kind of get you to is this way of saying, hey, I just want to run the lints, tests, and end-to-ends in the build, and NX figure out how. so the YAML file says the what, and NX can figure out the most optimal how.
Yep, that's exactly how we looked at it. Like that's literally the targets we talk about. Just build,
Awesome.
just lint and test and deploy, and like that's it. That's exactly right. And then the blank is NX takes over by design. So the pipeline is simple. All the complexity lives on the NX end on purpose. But yeah, that's exactly.
Zach, I take it that with. Sorry, go ahead, Kevin.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, you kind of, Zach, you just described kind of how our CI/CD system is very simple, and we're handing it off to NX to do the ordering and the process running.
Awesome.
What I was reading between the lines, I felt that Zach may have been segueing into like an NX cloud conversation a little bit there around
maybe
the
DTE, maybe,
yeah.
We got to make some sales.
That's where you were going, Zach, but I think that's where I was trying to segue to, because NX kind of runs it, and so in a lot of ways we're in that space where yes, I could say build, and NX goes, okay, what does build mean, right?
Yes.
So I'm thinking about affected. These X things have been affected. Oh, build actually depends on build TS and build Next. But like NX does all that for us, right? We're definitely not at the point where we're using like the NX Cloud, like the task distribution by any means. But I think it's still we've utilized it enough that I'm sure as we continue to mature, assuming pricing is right and all those fun things, that we may get to a point where we go, okay, yes, here's how we bring that part in, and here's how we leverage it.
Yeah, I'm not trying to make a sale on air here or anything, but
no.
That is like one of the interesting things. Yeah, yeah. That is one of the interesting things about what we like. This is why we decided to make that as our product offering, is because I feel like there's a lot of value that we can give there. One of the interesting things is a lot of the value you get out of that, you don't need necessarily NX Cloud for all the time. Y'all may be good examples of that. You're using a lot of the stuff that we offer from the package, and you get a huge amount of the value right there. The interesting thing is when you have sort of these massive build pipelines, which Youssef and I have seen in the past for sure, and seeing how we can actually, cut those things down. So yeah, that's something that it seems like you need one of these, you need like the cloud platform for. So right. That's kind of where we're aiming our product at. And yeah, I
love that about NX, by the way, right?
Yeah.
It's you get to, I guess like any good product, you get to try things out and then keep going in that journey and then go, okay, now I grab this, right?
Yes.
So I like that about NX in that case, because we've been able to utilize it for so many things. And you talk about those big repos. One of the things that we're looking at, I know we're looking at next or soon, is to be able to go, all right, how can we further optimize things, right? Like we have this, I would call it a lofty goal that Kevin always says, that all builds should be like 5 minutes. Like, I would love that. Yes. How do we make that happen, right? That's kind of where you start getting into that world of, all right, you're not going to run all that on your machine. How do you distribute? How do you further shard things so that you can get more speed out of it?
Yeah,
we actually glossed right over NX's like most core feature is just caching alone. Like that was new for us. That changed the game in its own right. We're still kind of living that dream, quite frankly. We're still going to push all the local caching. out of we can. Yeah, that was huge. That was a humongous time saver, like wall clock time saver for us too.
Yeah,
So that
100%.
alone, great.
Yeah, that idea of a distributed cache, that's what NX Cloud kind of started out as. It's just a way of being able to share that cache around. Interestingly, even before that was a thing and the idea of caching was a thing, NX Affected was a huge feature that accomplished, gave you a good amount of the value. And it's still something that's like, in many ways, the value of NX Affected and caching is kind of overlapping, because if it's not affected, you've probably definitely done it before. But they are complementary to each other. So you can like, there's still places where the cache does help, even when affected can trim some things off. So
absolutely. Before we adopted NX, we would use PNPM has like a filter where it understands package dependencies, and that was huge. And NX introducing the idea of like file level, like this file changed or the environment's different, and using that in its algorithm to calculate affected, so much more accurate, so much better than what we had before. We had Lerna at the company too, and things like that before it was wrapped in NX, and it missed or did the wrong thing a lot. As we moved to NX, it was that much more accurate way to express those dependencies, implicit dependency options, things like that, really helped. Really did.
Very cool. Yeah, I don't know if you know this, Kevin, but we actually maintain Lerna now too.
I know. I said it was before that.
Okay, cool. Sorry, Josh, what were you saying before?
No, it was like, and just to kind of hit on that home, like Digest and other test runners have affected concepts. They're also pretty terrible. We stopped using most of them because they just don't do a good job. We just defer all affected decision making to NX because it's the only one that gets it right. Come on.
Interesting.
Well, it was for me affected when I first got introduced to NX Affected. That was probably in 2017, 2018 when I was working with Jeff and Victor. It was phenomenal. Like it really completely changed the way how we work. Especially at the time, I was maintaining a design system. When you have a design system that has a bunch of components, if you don't have NX Affected, you have to rerun testing every time, right, in CI/CD, and that just by itself takes about like 20-30 minutes every time. But once we get introduced to NX Affected, we drastically reduce the time to like 3-4 minutes, and that was a huge deal because now you can get more PRs in every day if you're using trunk-based developments, faster testing, faster review. It was definitely a game changer. And in caching that was the cherry on top. It really was.
Years ago, we had some mono repositories with very large React applications all sharing a component library, and we had this awful choice of telling developers, build this and this and this library before you go run the app, or configure Webpack to transpile everything in the mono repository, and that doesn't scale either. Like it would fall down, it would run out of memory. It would run out of memory only in Jenkins. Like it was terrible. And NX Affected fixed all of that and let us have our mono repositories. And have it just do the right things before you get to the place you want to work in there. That was a huge win.
Unpopular take, perhaps, but I actually love NX for any scale of project. In particular, like when it comes to, like if I just have a script I want to write, I'll just make a new NX workspace, but I'll just use like the Node plugin, and I get all the tools that I want really from it. And it doesn't matter that it's not a mono repo. It doesn't matter that it's not huge. I still get a lot of that stuff for free from it, which I love. So that's big.
I'm going to segue on you a little bit. One shameless plug, as you said that just came to mind. One feature request I'm going to put out there is the idea that we should still be able to run NX executors and things like that at the root, right? I know technically you could do that by putting a project.json at the root and making it its own project and whatnot, but just having the root, when you set the whole create an NX workspace, even if it's just for a script I want to write and whatnot, it kind of brought that back to mind. But having things where you're like, hey, I need to run this on the whole repo, it actually matters for the whole repo, and I want to get all the goodness of an executor and all that, but I don't necessarily want to put a project.json on the root, right? Like, it's not exactly a project. It's a script I need to run for the root, but I want to get the caching and all the good stuff that goes with it. Just something to plug out there.
I get that, and we've actually seen that a good bit. So one of the things I've contributed to in the past, I haven't touched it for a while, unfortunately, but like the TanStack repos, if y'all are familiar with that, like TanStack Query, I believe TanStack Table, and several of the other ones are using NX now too, and they've all had that exact problem you described, Ladi, which is like we need something like a repo level executor, a repo level task, like an npm script at the root, which is like a thing that a lot of people have. um, and there is ways of doing that. Like you said, you could drop a project JSON at the root. Alternatively, you could build it into your plugin to put a project at the root, so you could do something like that. It would be cool if we gave like a blessed way almost, though, of saying this is how you do a repo level script or a repo level task, which would be cool. We probably should figure out the proper way of doing that. I think that's been lower on the priority just because you can do it, like we mentioned. So
There are ways, yeah, there are ways
yeah,
around it. So I get it. Having
yeah.
to prioritize a backlog and roadmap, I get it.
Yeah. We'll
Yeah.
we'll we'll figure that out at some point, I think, because it's especially the direction we're going. I feel like that's becoming a bigger and bigger need, and a more glaring and glaring thing that so many people have asked for. But yeah, maybe latching onto something you had mentioned too, Lai, just to push out some of our sales stuff too. We just launched a new like thing for the NX Cloud, like the hobby tier is what we're calling it, which is really cool in the sense that we are now giving for like a limited time full access to like all of the NX Cloud features. So the idea here is for larger companies, maybe Cvent, I don't know, you could like give a try with DTE and stuff like that to see how much time it saves you. Give a try with the distributed cache to see how helpful that is, like for the team.
Mhm.
And then you can kind of make a decision off of that, like, hey, is this something we want to pursue long term? So
How long?
uh,
How long is the trial period?
I don't recall. I think it's 2 months, I want to say. So yeah.
So, just a maybe an idea. A lot
Yeah,
of enterprises are really sensitive about their source code going on other people's infrastructure.
absolutely. Yeah.
So that kind of hobby plan is cool. I really appreciate it, but it's not just a simple conversation for a lot of folks.
Right.
A lot of folks do have relationships with cloud providers like Google Clouds and Amazons of the world, and some of those providers, Amazon comes to mind, have like the ability to run somebody else's software in your Amazon account. I forget what they call it. Like
Yeah,
turn
like an AMI, are you talking
Yeah,
about?
an AMI. So an
Mhm.
AMI way to trial you might get you into more enterprises.
That's really cool. Yeah, we actually are exploring that kind of solution with some of our enterprises right now. It's not something I think we've considered for the trial yet, but that's absolutely a good idea. So that's very cool.
Because you're going
I'll,
to see devs who maybe in companies who want to do this, and they just know that, oh, now I have to talk to legal. Now I
yeah,
have to go through this
I
process.
gotta talk to security, and we gotta go through it right. But you could run your own AWS account. No brainer.
yeah, very cool. Well, yeah, at least for folks out there, if you're wanting to try some stuff out with NX and just see like what that stuff is, that's potentially a good way of just seeing what exactly we have to offer. I'm really excited about a lot of the CI stuff that's going on there with the ability to use like our cloud build network and to kind of see how that works. I really like the UI for that we have inside the NX repo right now, so that's real fun. But yeah. Yeah, well, we're coming to the end of our time here. We're even a bit over. Do y'all have someplace y'all need to go? Or I feel like we should probably
I
wrap
do
this up.
have someplace I need to go, but
Yes,
I could give another minute or so.
cool. Well, maybe closing thoughts. Maybe starting with you, Kevin.
Ooh, well, I love the mix of open source and services that Narwhal provides, and keeping that platform open and adoptable is super important to us. So we know we're not going to get boxed into any one thing, and it's been exciting and very impactful here in our sort of journey towards platform engineering over the last couple of years.
Very cool. Anything to
I'd
add,
second
Ladi?
that. Yeah, I was gonna say I'd second that. The idea that just keeping that good balance. I think you guys have been nailing it quite a bit. But keep at it. Don't go too much to the one side or the other, if you will, because I know you got to eat, but just keeping that balance, right? would be it. And yeah.
Awesome. Josh, any last thoughts?
No, said you guys are very much aligned with where we're going and keep it up. We've been taking on new features as you guys release them. It's been a pretty good alignment on this journey.
Heck yeah. Youssef, I'll give you the last one.
I really love the fact that we've been using NX here at Cvent. I can see its impact every day on our products, and it really did help Cvent cement its position as a true technology company. We can move faster, we can deliver product faster to our consumers. It's been really phenomenal tool to use here.
Awesome. Yeah, just to put my 2 cents in, it has been awesome to have this conversation with y'all. For people listening, I've met Youssef before, but first time meeting Kevin, Josh, and Ladi, I pretty much just started the recording as soon as we all jumped in here. I felt like it is, I don't know, it's just really cool to be able to talk to engineers who have taken, the tool that we've been working on, and y'all picked it up exactly. It seems like I did. I feel like I didn't have to coach you or anything. You just saw the tool and saw where it was meant to go. So that's a really rewarding feeling for me working at NX to see, it's working, but also just to be able to have the conversation with y'all and get your thoughts on it as real users of our stuff. So we really appreciate y'all giving us that time and that opportunity. So thanks, y'all.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
You got it. Well, we'll wrap this one up, and hope y'all all have a great day.
You too. Have a good day.
Okay.
Bye-bye.